And I'm hugely aware of the huge amount of endeavour that Andy and the finance team and the commissioning team, and in fact all members of the executive, are taking on this agenda. We knew this was going to be a very difficult year, and we put in place a level of savings programs which have actually been reasonably well realised, and again we're hitting our high level of savings targets. I think it is worth the governing body understanding both the context of this. So we will be one of 2 CCGs in the South region moving our position out this month. I suspect, and we believe, that there will be a number of other CCGs that will move out in subsequent months, but it puts us in a very difficult position, and there can be no doubt that it is a major issue for the governing body to ensure that we are fixated on cost controls and cost reduction whilst maintaining safe and effective services for our population. So we can't understate the significance, materiality and importance of this challenge. The second challenge that we need to appreciate as a governing body is, of course, if we were operating in a system where our partner and provider organisations were in good financial health, then it becomes not an easier conversation, but it becomes a conversation which can understand where the imbalance sits between the money resources allocated to a commissioner and the resources being consumed by provider organisations. What we recognise is that across Portsmouth and South East Hampshire there is significant financial challenges vested in all providing organisations, and therefore we're being cognisant as a commissioning organisation that the journey isn't one of moving the burden of the financial burden from one organisation to another, but is about the whole system reaching financial stability, because that way we maintain safe services, good quality care. We don't impose financial burdens on organisations which result in knee-jerk actions and expose individual patients to risk. So it is important to see the context of our financial recovery being also seen alongside the context of the system's financial recovery and safe and effective care. And I know Julie has been working around the quality impact assessment of all of the cost reduction programmes, and Alex has been therefore working with Andy, leading on the relationships we have with the other organisations in Portsmouth and South East Hampshire to make sure we're fixated on cost reduction and quality improvement and not shunting price. So I say that advisedly because I think it's really important for the governing body to understand the journey we go on isn't short-term action which leaves pain in other sectors, but is short-term action which reduces cost and maintains quality.
So I'm hearing that we understand the imperatives, we understand the difficulties, that plans are in place, and obviously we'll be feeding that back to the governing body in due course. The minutes of the financial recovery meetings also are available if you want to see what we're doing in there. Thank you very much, Lee, for that. It's very nice, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, David. If I could go straight to page 3 of the integrated performance report, and I think you'll see there that there's an awful lot of positive achievements that have been delivered across the wide spectrum of healthcare up to now, and we really need to acknowledge those. Even in some of the more challenging areas that I've spoken about previously and which are in this report, there's still a lot of positive action and progress being made around those areas. Cancer, 62-day first definitive treatment being one of them. So where I've reported before to governing body that it's been a challenging area, steep improvement trajectory around that particular area through hard system working and concerted effort across the system. The standard against that particular target has managed to be achieved over several months. That has dipped, however, for November, but suffice to say it's still well ahead of the improvement trajectory that was set for it a few months ago, which is a reflection, as I said, of all the hard work that's gone in there. Another challenging area, which is positive news, is around the ambulance and ambulance targets. Although they remain challenging for the reasons stated within the report, the position improves month on month, and SCAS as a trust are one of the best in the country in terms of performance. So that also needs to be recognised as well as the challenge that is still out there. I think referral to treatment times, the 18-week challenge, I think is starting to continue and remain a challenge in a high-risk area. The current position at Portsmouth hospitals is around 88.9 against a target of 92%. And the troubled specialties that I've spoken around before that are stated within the report remain. However, there's been a big focus on those areas. As I said, the system issue commissioning team have been working hard with the hospital and the acute trust and wider across the system, and putting a lot of work into those areas to address some of the capacity issues which are causing some of those problem areas. I'm sure Lynn will talk in a minute about her action on elective group that she has set up. She meets regularly with the CSCs within the hospital to look at pathway redesign, outsourcing, which will have an impact on those specialties to help address some of the capacity issues around those areas and help improve the position around referral to treatment times. The report also talks about CDIF, but I won't go on about that because I'm sure Judy will pick that up in the quality report. I think the last area to really raise is ED. You'll see from the report that the position around that in terms of the performance position is probably one of the areas that remains a significant challenge and shows little improvement in terms of performance. However, underpinning that, and it's already been alluded to from Alex's report earlier, the amount of work that's going on under that to have an impact from a performance and a quality perspective is immense. It's driven by the A&E Delivery Board. Alex referred earlier to the winter warmer and the recent perfect week that they've had. ESIP are in with PHT to support the work. We have the discharge to assess, the FIT team, the integrated discharge team, all of which, plus the action plan that's been set up, which is monitored through the ED Delivery Board. So there's an awful lot of system-wide work going on, which will improve performance over time. And I'm sure there's others around the table who could give you a much more in-depth analysis around that work. But although those challenging areas remain, and they do remain high risk, it's worth bringing to the governing body's attention the work that's going on around those to improve those and make sure that the quality of care for those patients who come across those services remains high. So I think that's it in summary. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Beforehand, on here we've got standards relating to EIP were achieved. And yet looking at the IAF, aren't we in the bottom quartile for EIP?
Early intervention psychosis. So we are achieving the standard. How we compare benchmarks to everybody else, I'll have to go and check. So we're achieving the national standard, which I think is 50%, but how that compares to everyone else in the country, I'll have to go and look at their figures.
Sorry, Pat.
Okay, thank you, Mike. I wonder if we could look at 1.1, and I'm looking at the second to last bullet point, really. So you've got the CCG is reported as mostly meeting expectation for children and young people mental health services. Two questions. The out of area placement, is that in relation to children and young people specifically?
No, I don't believe it is. It's related to mental health.
It would be helpful to have that clarity. But the other point that I wanted to, the question that I wanted to ask is to understand what mostly meeting expectation means. Because certainly, from the intelligence that I pick up at variable, there is a big concern about out of area placement, both for adults with mental health problems and for children with mental health problems. So I'm struggling to understand that particular.
Okay. I can answer part of that, and I might have to revert to colleagues. So in terms of the actual reported position, in terms of mostly meeting expectations, they're national assessments. So I can't remember all the categories, I'm afraid. Mostly meeting expectations is a nationally derived category. They take grouping of the indicators within the IAF, so the Improvement Assessment Framework. They group those together, and that's how they come up with their their assessment of how we're doing locally. To be fair, that forms part of a South assessment, forms part of that requirement. So, and we're currently completing one for Q3, so that was based on the previous reported position. I believe there's a lot of work that's happened between Q2 and Q3 to address those particular areas. But off the top of my head, I can't remember what it is. Lynn, could you?
Pat, what we'll do is, if it's helpful, I'll catch up with you and I'll give you some more detail around that, because it's probably very useful for us to speak to the Children's Commissioner and get that detail for that particular self-assessment, because as Mike said, it's being redone, and I think it'd be useful for us to understand some of the areas where we weren't achieving, because obviously most achieving suggests that there's a few areas there that weren't up to scratch, so we can do that.
Sorry. Just to say, Pat, that the commissioning of the end-to-end children's mental health pathway involves ourselves, as you know, and Specialised, and some of the out-of-area placements, particularly for CAMS patients, rest with Specialised, and there may be something we need to do to start joining that up to understand what the requirements are for our local residents and whether there are any particular gaps that we're facing, and it may be just helpful to connect in with Specialised to see if there's anything that we could be doing better locally, and happy that we can take that through, as Lynn said, with our Children's Commissioner, and indeed some of the outer area mental health placements, similar issues, not entirely, we still have some responsibility. My focus is to try and join up the pathways so that as commissioners we have an agreed approach to some of this. As at the moment it sometimes feels quite fragmented, and how do we align ourselves better would be a good takeaway.
I think that we would find that very, very, very helpful, Alex, because there is no doubt that we hear about young people having to go to, I want to say Somerset, but certainly down in the West Coast, which can't be right. We know that we have older people with mental health problems who are definitely out of area. They're at Roehampton. And from a patient experience point of view, that's just, for me anyway, not acceptable. So I would find it really helpful to kind of have some real proper data around that. Thank you.
Michael, just wanted to query something with you. It's page 4 on my tablet, the performance summary. You talked about scars improving month on month. And I struggled to work out how that could be the case, looking at the solid blank of red across August, September, October, and I don't know what November, but it looks like it's November. What were you referring to when you said scars was improving?
Sorry, having got the up-to-date information, November's looking a lot better, particularly for red 1. I think from where they were and against their improvement trajectory, so they have an improvement trajectory as well. They're on track now for their red 1, and I think they're just under for red 2 and 19. And I think based on the fact that they're benchmarked against the rest of the country, and they come out as one of the top responders in the country, it was really based on that position. I think with the struggles they've got that we've talked about before in terms of recruitment, retention, and workforce, to get from where they were to where they are now against their improvement trajectory, I think you can see an improved position.
Alex, you had a question?
Can I just follow on from that, Mike? Is what's reported here as Covenant, Fareham and Gosport, and are what you're talking about at more of a SCAS buy level? Is that the difference?
No, the figures on page 4 are SCAS trust level. Yeah.
Sorry, can I have a supplementary? I'm sorry. Okay. I'm just struggling a bit with this. Looking at, and I appreciate that the information for you is out of date now because you've had more up-to-date information than we have. But if we look at emergency and unscheduled care and the various actions that were being put in place, and there are certain words like actions, under the actions of the bullets talk about test phase, and there are various other system resilience plans and various other things. And then we catch up with the report that we had from Alex earlier. I think it was Alex was talking about what happened over Christmas and New Year. Would it be fair for me to suppose from that things are not quite as optimistic as those actions might lead one to think, or not?
I'll answer that. I think it's fair to say we are not in the position we would want to be. You're absolutely right. And the performance at the Trust and for us locally is still poor. I think it would be helpful, and this is not an excuse, but I think we need to take it in the context of what is happening nationally as well. So whilst we are still performing poorly, other systems around the country, and everyone will have seen within national news and local news, that even some of the previously best performing systems are now really struggling, and their performance has dropped dramatically, sufficient to increase the interest in this media and obviously nationally with the government, quite rightly, and there is considerable distress in all the systems. I think in addition to that, you will have seen over the Christmas period, when Alex's report was referring to our Christmas plan, we had prepared well as a system. We used forecasting for all our providers collectively, and we actually relied on SCAS heavily in this respect, because they are particularly good for the ambulance service and are actually much better than most of the other health providers in being able to forecast their activity and the peaks and troughs of activity, and how we are to gear up our services to those. We did that collectively as a system, which included the 999 activity, the calls through 111 and what they were anticipating, the calls that the out-of-hours service were likely to receive, and we overlaid all of those in order to prepare. So I think this year in particular as a system we worked really well together in that. We are doing a bit of analysis to see how did that forecast work with what actually happened. And whilst in some ways the forecasting was very helpful, and we did see peaks and troughs, what we have seen is about a 12-hour gap in where the peak landed and where our forecast had anticipated. So that's something it's something we learn about as we go forward, and we're doing a deep dive into that activity to understand was there a particular factor because Christmas Eve fell on a Saturday, and was there an additional Saturday factor that needed to be factored in, and the information analysts across all the organisations are working together to look at that, because we need to learn from this. Data is really, really powerful and can be helpful for us, and we need to capture that now before we forget it, so we don't come round to next year and later on this year and try and forecast again. So that is working. In terms of the other activity you have seen, we had ambulance handover delays. Again, local news, national news, and some of the when those delays happen again, it is unfortunately quite often the Portsmouth picture that comes up on the screen. It doesn't always mean that it's our system in trouble, so you need to remember that. So when you see a number of ambulances outside the Trust, although there were delays, and we have had periods of delays, we believe some of the measures we've put in place have improved that situation. So whilst there are sometimes ambulances held outside the Trust, it doesn't always mean they are not able to offload. It may be that the number have come in, have offloaded, and are waiting to go out on calls. So that's another misnomer that we need to just dispel, I think, with our comms colleagues, and to help the local population. So I think we've learned a lot over the winter. It wasn't perfect. However, I think without those plans and working together, we might well have seen a different picture. We didn't have a control on that though.
Thank you for that, because I think it's very difficult when you're looking at retrospective figures, and of course what's happened very recently and concurrently is on everybody's minds. And the assurance you've given me, I was never in any doubt that all the staff, be they in the ambulance or the hospital or whatever, GPs were all working flat out. That wasn't the problem. It was whether or not the plans that were indicated here had had any kind of impact. And of course you need to wait to do the data analysis. I appreciate that, but it's very useful to hear that it could have been, I suppose, it could have been worse. I mean, it's what you're basically saying. We put in place stuff and a lot of it worked. We don't know how well until we've done, and we'll have that by the next time we meet in public, won't we? So we can be able to talk confidently about that too.
Yes, I believe so, and I also believe that the interrelationships between Portsmouth Hospital and the ambulance service have improved immensely over the last few months. It's a tense situation when ambulances are being held over and the emergency department is full. That is likely to be tense. Actually, the crews on the ground and the staff on the ground always work very well together. I think it's fair to say relationships were not always as good as they are now. And Tim Powell, the Chief Executive of the Trust, meets on a weekly basis with the ambulance service now, either directly or over the telephone to have a catch up and work out where they are. So I think that can only help matters as we go forward, to connect together.
Philip and then Pat.
Yep. On the next page, that's page 5 in section 4 about QUIP. At the last governing body, we talked about some concerns about how QUIP was going to deliver, and Andy shared some of the background work. But at that point, we were relatively reassured that a lot of the QUIP deliverables were backloaded, but we see it slipped yet again. So I guess I've got two questions. One is, how confident are you that that level of variance, 1.9 million, is going to be maintained, or is there a danger that could slip worse? And then the second one is really just QUIP, in some ways, is a cornerstone essence of what the SCP is trying to deliver writ large. I mean, I'm quite nervous if QUIP's not delivering. The level of confidence in the 3 years of SCP delivery is quite challenging.
The first bit, so we've stress tested this, Philip, and our current forecast is we deliver 90% of the programme, so we have tested that, and yes, it is back-ended, but based on what we're seeing, we believe it will deliver.